Welcome to this episode of Renegade Talk with the beautiful Katy from Canada. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm so happy to have you on today because I think what you are doing is absolutely great. You're an artist, and I met you because I saw that Ren reposted some of your art on his threads, I think, or his X. I don't remember which account.
I Yeah, it was on his threads.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I saw that painting and I just thought, what you did there was absolutely crazy. So we're going to talk about that and about how you discovered Ren. But first of all,
hmm
I want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you grew up and how you came to love art and start painting.
Okay. So I'm Katy. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And My art passion started when I actually was in piano class. And I did piano from since I was 8 to about 17, and then I got kicked out of my conservatory because I wasn't showing up. But but my it started because my one uh friend who was in my class, she was a little bit younger than me, but she has amazing drawing skills, and she drew me this little, obviously drawing, but it was like a little boat, and then she had the rest of it covered, like with another piece of paper. So she was telling me like this story about this boat, and then she revealed this small little wave, and she was telling me about how that wave was going to take out that boat. And then she was like, "Well, if you think that's a problem," and she took the paper off and she drew this huge dragon, and how the story just kind of like all tied together, because she's like, when she took the paper off, she's like, if you think that's a problem, you still have to deal with this dragon with your little boat. So it was just that started that. But my mom would say, when I was like 5, there was a show called Pappyland in Canada, and she remembers when I drew a tiger out of the number 5,
Okay.
and and he was so impressed because I was so young, and I'm like, it's a tiger, it's a number 5, yeah. But that's not what actually started my passion. My passion was when I saw my friend be able to draw these figures, no problem, and like I would from there I started doodling all the time. My skills were not as great as hers,
Mhm.
but that's what, when you're committed to something, it kind of progressively gets better.
Yeah.
But I'd say my skills, actually, my best work have been in the last like 3 years, because for the longest time there was a gap of, um I didn't I didn't what would I say? I didn't fully see my painting through. If it wasn't like perfect, I'd be like, eh, I'm okay with this.
Hmm.
But if I'm like, uh, if I saw like imperfections, I'd be like, it's okay. Like my painting's okay. But from like the last couple of years, I had to sit myself down and force myself to make those corrections. And this is where like the artwork that you see that I've posted, that was like my progress.
Can you pinpoint the moment or the period in time where you decided you were going to go a little deeper with the art and try to correct things and change things? Because if for the longest time you just saw imperfections and thought, it's okay, and you didn't do anything about it, something must have changed between then and now.
Yeah, actually, it was a couple years ago when I was painting. Uh, there was two paintings that I did for my two nephews, and one was Deadpool, and the other was a character from Five Nights at Freddy's, and um, when I when I first did a doodle of my first attempt for Deadpool
Mhm.
was freehand, and oh, it was not turning out the way that I wanted it to. It was more like Deadpoo, and and I'm like, oh my god. So this is where I had to think, okay, like I had to use it as practice as if it were not my nephew's, if
Mhm.
it was like an actual commission piece. So um I looked up ways to help with like uh not perspective, but like the the measurements, because I
Mhm.
found that I really struggled getting the measurements correctly. And so like I used them this time I used the grid pattern where you
Yeah.
have to, yeah, that thing. And it didn't really turn out that great, but it got me an outline good
Yeah.
enough that I can actually start painting. But it was Deadpool the first time that I really wanted to fix the mistakes,
Yeah.
because for me, like I have ADHD, and so when I'm doing fine details, like straight lines, I find that when I get excited, I'm like I'm going straight, and then like it just does its own thing. I'm like, okay, that that was one problem that I had, was actually taking my time and like going slow. And if I have to like take a break, just take a step back
Yeah.
to kind of recenter myself so I can actually get a good
Yeah.
um, get it, yeah, a good, nice, clean line.
Yeah.
And also using different tools, like using a pen or a marker to get like the really, really small thin lines.
Yeah.
Now I just use a detailed brush, but that took some practice.
Yeah. Of course.
Um,
And
but it was, go ahead.
yeah,
What were you gonna say?
I'm just thinking about all of that. And do you think that at the time where you were um, just taking in the flaws of what you painted and just left them at that, do you think it's more um, of you thinking that you can't get any better, and that that's the maximum of what you're capable to do, so you're just going to leave it at that? Or do you think it's more of something where you thought, well, I can accept that it's not perfect? Because I know that both are true for me. Having ADHD too, is that oftentimes I think, well, you're not really good at this, and I sometimes have some type of imposter syndrome. So I think, you don't know how to do it anyways, and you're just flaunting something you don't really know how to do, and so that's the maximum, of effort you can put into it. But then also sometimes I think, well, it's okay if I leave it at that, because I don't have the energy or the time to go deeper and do more, because it takes a lot of energy out of me. So every time I get stuck in a hurdle, it takes me a lot of reconsidering to go beyond that and to think, okay, I'm going to put the energy and the effort in because it's worth it, instead of going on another tangent and doing something different and starting something else and just leaving it as it is.
Yeah, I find that I had to start holding myself accountable, because I there's too many projects left half done.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I had to really work on, was to hold myself accountable and to finish it to the degree that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there was certain aspects of the painting that I didn't know how to do, I would take a break from the painting, and I would, research and look for easy ways for me to actually be able to integrate that skill or that knowledge into what I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
Because um, I found that when I gave myself a crutch of, well, I could, it's okay. It's not the greatest, but it's okay. That gives me an out to not actually push it a little further.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was another turning point for me, was again holding myself accountable to be able
Mhm.
to get to the product that I want. And I've actually learned how to like, there's so many things that kind of I've not perfected, but I know where to stop
Mhm.
when the painting is done. It's not like there's perfectionism, and then there's it's never going to be good enough type of
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectionism,
Yeah.
right? And I know for me, when a painting is done, or a piece is done, or anything's done, it's, if I can look over it and not see any of those flaws, if I'm not able to pick out anything,
Mhm.
then that's when it's done.
Yeah.
And but there was also times where I had to like, there's a little painting exercise for with watercolor. It's just a simple fun exercise where it's called reverse painting, I believe, where you put like dabs of color down on the paper and then you just use pen to outline it.
Yeah.
And there's no expectation of what it's going to turn out to,
Yeah.
right? And that was one thing that I had to learn, was to allow the creativity to flow without any expectation.
Yeah.
And I'd always give myself a deadline of, okay, if I have today to finish it, or
Mhm.
not even to finish it, just to work on it.
Mhm.
And whatever state it's in, that's it. It's complete.
Yeah.
Because that's where people start to nitpick. This is where they start to like overthink, like, oh, this is wrong, but this is wrong. It's like, no, it's fine the way it is.
Mm.
And to be able to allow myself to like take a step back and be like, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
Present it, and that's it.
When did you start really believing that you could just that you could, expose your art to the world?
Actually, I'd say the moment I started to want to doodle is when I started showing people, because um well, everybody likes to show off what they've done, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, some of the comments that I got was like, oh, what is that? Or is that a horse, or is that like some sort of deformed creature? I'm like, but over time, I, again, like, a lot, I will, like, as I discuss stuff, like, a lot of my stuff that I've done is through practice of, okay, well, if I want to make art, I have to learn to take criticism,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
right? And even at a young age, I was like, okay, well, if I want to show people that I like people's inputs, I like people's insights, because when when it gets to a point where I'm like, I don't know what else to add, or I don't know, like, if this is good, getting someone's input of like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's good. And then I'm like, okay, if it's good, what else can I do? What can I make
Mhm.
it better? But yeah, when I was young, that's when I love showing people my work, and I love showing when it's in like the progression stages, because it allows me, again, fresh eyes to see these imperfections, or if people have ideas that they want to like throw at me, then it allows me to either change or alter the way like I can see it. And all the paintings that I've done up until this point are accumulations of mistakes and
Yeah.
playing and experimenting. My perception of emotion when it comes to painting does not equate to the same emotion that I feel with music.
Mhm.
That would be where the emotional aspect
Mhm.
um, comes into play. Mine is just more visually appealing.
Mhm.
I like how it looks. Does it evoke that same type of feeling or that emotion? Do I feel that anger or pain when I'm painting stuff? No.
Mm.
Like when I painted that large piece from the Cujo
Mhm.
beatdown, that one that you saw in Red's
Mhm.
thread, um, I didn't put the emotion of like Ren's anger and the frustration and all that. It was like an emotional block for
Mhm.
myself, where this is what I was just more excited to even as a challenge. I see my art as challenges
Yeah.
more so as an emotional outlet for me. And that's where I kind of like get a little conflicted with myself, where I'm like, I should be feeling stuff when I'm painting, but it's not an outlet for me in that way.
I don't think you should be. I don't think there's any blueprint for art that artists should feel this way or another. I think it's just what was interesting in Shay's case is that he said he never looked at it that way because he was never someone who really expressed a lot of his feelings and emotions. But now, when he looks back at stuff he did when he was 15, 16, and then he looks at those drawings, he can see, he can correlate how he was drawing stuff with what he was going through. And
Hmm.
said, well, maybe that wasn't the emotion I was putting into it, or I wasn't thinking about that. But I can see that there are some drawings or paintings I did when I was 16. I was really angry at the world and everyone, my parents, where they look angrier. And then the ones I did where I missed my hometown, they look more melancholic, and so it's, I think there is something when you create where you don't, because if you want your piece to evoke emotion when people look at it,
Hmm.
you can't only do something that is strictly uh, technical. There has to be some type of emotion, so it doesn't have to be as you said with the Cujo beatdown drawing, it doesn't have to be anger or anything, but I mean, the passion you put into it because you loved, making that and you were really invested in the painting shows. So, I mean, whatever people take away from it, there is that emotion that you put in is the passion. But so just to go back a bit, how and where and why did that happen with Ren and how did you discover him?
So actually, I came across Ren back in August of 2023, when I was cleaning my apartment. I guess on YouTube, he just popped up in my list, and I think it was the singing part at the end of High Ren, close to the end of High Ren, where I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty cool. I'll put this to a playlist. I'll watch this. I'll just watch this later. It was like 2 weeks later. I'm like sitting on my couch thinking, yeah, maybe I'll watch this.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, I'm like, what am I watching?
Mm-hmm.
And then just I sat there and listened, and like it was the singing, it's the back and forth, and then what actually got me hooked was not just his lyrics and his music, it was the spiritual aspect that he has
Yeah.
with just in himself,
Mm-hmm.
talking about the light and the dark and the pendulum swinging and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one line in particular where he said, like, I'll inspire the meek to be strong. I'm like, okay, let me just click on another song.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know his story at that time, so I know I was reading here and there, and then I came across the song "Suicide," and that it wasn't the lyrics; it was just the song, the melodies, the combination of all the just everything. It, it I was like, oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
I have to listen to this a million times more. And then that's again, I want to learn more of his backstory and then like to show the stuff that he's been through, um, and how he's succeeded. It just that's the inspiration is the fact that now I have no excuse. I have no excuse to not do the level of work that I can do, because he went through all of stuff and still put that effort. But at that point in time, too, it's for him, it was sink or swim.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for people who are not in that same situation, the sink or swim is not, it doesn't put you in a dire situation where you have to, you either do it or you don't. where we have that ability to just kind of float there, and we have that lifesaver, and we'll just like, we'll do it later. We'll do it later. So that was the inspiration of me. Okay, let's let's actually try. Let's try and do something.
Mm-hmm.
And back to what you're saying about the addiction or the obsession part, I see it as like he has this recipe that hits every single uh need that we have. It's like the equivalency of McDonald's or something, where they have that the recipe is so the taste recipe is so down pat that it hits everything perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I see Ren. Is it's his lyrics, it's the ability to combine the beats, the melodies, harmonies. Um, it's the dedication and the fact that he does uh, multiple parts for him. Like he's not just a singer. He's not just, he doesn't just play the instrument. He writes, he produces, he plays, he sings, he does the sound stuff, and that is kind of what solidifies his foundation to to be able to be successful. I know with people who are creative, they could visually see the vision for like kind of manifesting in their mind, and it's that kind of happens with like my paintings and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's like when people are giving me ideas, I could see it physically,
Mm-hmm.
not physically, I can see it in my head,
Yeah.
and like if it works, if it doesn't work, and then allowing myself to still have my not even my vision of it, but allowing, yeah, the other people's inputs, which kind of goes back to the beginning of allowing people to see your drawings, I hear your ideas, and the fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you're keeping all that to yourself, there are so many ideas that are like left in the starting stages
Yeah.
because they're afraid of the input of what people are going to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it really does come down to like the having the right people in your corner will actually amplify the creative aspects in someone. And
Mm-hmm.
then it also comes down to the discipline of following through with it.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm reading this book called The Creative Ambush, and they were talking about how creativity comes in the masculine and feminine energy of um, feminine energy is free flowing.
Yeah.
It comes in from like intuition. It comes like when people talk about certain ideas that came out of nowhere. Like I know Ren was talking about certain things when he's editing music,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, I'm just playing certain things until I hear that exact that I know that it's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's it. It's like the difference. No, not even the difference with the feminine energy coming in with free flowing intuition ideas. The masculine is the one that does the the action portion of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so this is where having the balance of both masculine and feminine energy to allow a creative thing to actually unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And where a lot of people get stuck is that feminine energy is there's so much coming in, like the cup is now overflowing with ideas, but they're not following through with those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having that balance, and I think that is what Ren has, is that balance of the masculine and feminine energy of conjuring stuff, but also following through with when he has those ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my god, I want to change it again. it's, I apologize to people because I'm like, I have these things that come in my mind, and I'm like, a lot of the time when I'm explaining something, I tend I kind of visualize it as a train going along a track, and sometimes the track stops and the train keeps going,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I really hope this makes sense.
I know you're going to, come around to the point, and I know that you are making sense, but it is sometimes I feel that same way. I don't know if you have that going on in your brain too. It's like if you really go on a tangent and it's like you're following your own interesting thought process, and you're like, oh yeah, and that too, and oh yeah, and then suddenly you're like, oh my god, how am I going to make this make sense again, because
There's
all
so
the
much
way back.
information coming.
And then you're
That's
like, oh
exactly
my
what's been
god,
happening.
I'm so far away from the idea, the beginning of the idea. And yeah, so sometimes, yeah, having to pull that back and go back to making sense is not always easy. But yeah, I know a lot about tensions.
I found that being gentle with myself, um, when I know, like, because I'm a registered massage therapist, so for the first 5 years of my career, I really struggled talking to people because I was going through a lot. My mental energy was always like it was very low. And my social battery, I'd say, would run out at like maybe face to face 30 minutes talking to
Yeah,
people. Now adding like massaging for an hour and then massaging and then trying to have a conversation with a stranger, that that's very challenging.
yeah, yeah,
And so I would always shut down because at the time I didn't know I had really bad anxiety. And when my anxiety spiked, like my memory shuts off completely, and I would be in a constant brain fog for eternity. And it was being able to be gentle with myself when I had those days where I call it poo brain, where I'm just that's what I was worried about today, to be honest, because I'm like, oh, I hope my brain is gonna like not just like blank out on me. And knowing that you do have these flaws and you're aware of them, and when you don't make those flaws the forefront of your ability to not succeed, people are actually uh, they're very understanding. And when you're actually able to be honest with yourself,
yeah,
then you can actually be more at ease.
yeah,
So I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, so I I want to learn how to talk to people, because even when I was a kid, even up until like I was 22 or something, I would be shy. And it wasn't really shyness, it was obviously the anxiety, but I
yeah,
was so shy that I would be mute.
yeah.
Like I wouldn't all like I want to talk to people. I really did want to talk to people,
Mhm.
but I felt like I didn't have anything to contribute to the conversation. And on top of that, I stumble over my words sometimes, or I would my thought process was never linear. It was all over the place. And so trying to make sense of how come I can't, have a functional conversation with someone. This kind of goes back to like the 2020, where I was like, okay, well, if I want to be in this type of service with people and I'm talking, I need to figure out how to fix this problem.
Mhm.
And so like was looking over psychology stuff. It's not like I opened up books and just started reading, because I find that reading for me, depending on what the context is, like I don't struggle reading. I struggle following through with reading. And
Yeah.
I find that when I'm reading something, I'm reading it like several times, and I'm like, I don't know what I just read.
Oh,
So
sorry to interrupt you there. It's just because, hold that thought, but it's just, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I love reading, and I have had a passion for reading since I was a kid. And it's only um it since I've been an adult that I had, a lot of different things to do, and life happening and kids and stuff, and so I didn't really take enough time to sit down and really read and think, I really want to get to the end of this book. So I used to have stacks of books that were half read, and every time I would look at them and I would go like, oh, I really want to finish this book, and it's been sitting there for 6 months, and I really would like to know how it ends. And so there were so many times where I just sat down and thought, today's a nice Sunday afternoon. I'm going to just make myself a cup of coffee or tea or something, sit down with my book, and that's going to be great. And then I read, and suddenly I realize that I'm reading. I'm like, I don't know what happened in the past 10 pages, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, where the F did I cop out of the book, And I'm like going back in the pages and trying to find the last thing I remember about what I was reading. But I know that my eyes are reading, and I know that my brain is registering something, but I can't
Yeah.
remember because I was thinking about something else at the same time. And so it's like when this happens, and this can happen a lot if I'm not really, I need to be really in the mood or really relaxed to read and be, content with reading. So,
Mhm.
and I need to not have important stress factors, because if that happens, there's no need in me to for me to sit down and try to read because I can't. But if I really want to do that, there've been so many times where I'm just like, I have to go back one or two chapters because I don't know what I've just read. It's like crazy, and
Yep.
you've read it, but you just don't. Yeah. So right.
It's not forming whatever the sentence is saying. You're like, okay, I see words
Yeah.
and I'm reading it in a reading fashion,
Yeah.
but it's not. Why is it not like
It's like
coming together as something?
I think that it's kind of funny because it's like if someone was watching me, was looking at me, it would seem like I'm reading and I'm really concentrated in what I'm doing, but actually my mind is somewhere completely different. But it looks like I'm reading. But it's
Yeah, I
great.
mean it's the same thing with painting where I'm like I could be sitting there with my my paintbrush and I'll just be like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just I'm like I'm giving the look of a painter, but
Yeah.
half the time I'm like I really don't want to do this. But
It just magically comes to life, and in the end you're like,
yeah,
it took me so many skills, and you don't know what you just did. And that's coming back to the idea of the hive intelligence, is that I think no one has the one answer. I think
no,
everyone has the answer, and i
yeah,
think i think each and every one of us have parts of the answer, because we all have a different type of understanding, a different type of intelligence, a different type of feeling and background. And if we all come together, that's going to be the answer to things. And that's why I
yeah.
think it's always so interesting to have, any conversation, as we said in the coming back to the beginning, even with, and maybe mostly with people that don't agree with me, because that's the most interesting part, is to have confronting ideas. Um, and to hear someone give their point of view in a completely different light, because if you have a little bit of empathy, then you can try to put yourself in their shoes and understand, even if it's very confronting for you. So I think it's always very interesting to have completely different thoughts thrown at you and ideas. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's really a collective thing, and that is something that is very dear to my heart, and that I connect and relate to Ren so much every time he goes back to that. Anytime there's an Instagram story popping up, or some lyric or something where he touches upon that subject, it's really one of the things where I respect him the most for, because I think it's so important that someone brings that back to life, because there is such a lack of unity right now and community.
Well, and like he is in such a not a power position, but he is in a position of power where um he does have such an influential he has influence over a lot of people.
Yeah, you have the
And
platform to voice things. Yeah,
and having someone with that type of humility where he's gone through so much, but he still is kind towards one another. And, you know, showing that the empathy and showing that, you're not alone in what you're going through. And, you know, it is possible to get through some really difficult stuff if you're actually wanting to. But I think it's the I think for everything going on right now, I think it's having someone in that position with, I'd say, spiritual woo woo stuff. He is like a beacon of light. He
Mhm.
is like the one that uh when he speaks or whatever he does, like it, or just his existence, it just brings light to the world.
Mhm.
And with all that's going on in the world, I think what it comes down to is if people want things to change, it all comes down to you have to change what's in yourself,
Mhm.
because it creates this ripple effect where
Yep.
if you're not okay with yourself, you're going to make everything else that much, like everything around you,
Mhm.
feed off of what you're feeling. So if you're feeling great about yourself and you want to like give someone a compliment, that's going to uplift that person, and that's going to send like a ripple effect of everything else.
Mhm.
And so when it comes down to it, if people can actually just focus on, being okay with themselves and working on their inner self, the outside will actually start to change.
Yeah, of course.
And it's such a blessing to have someone like Ren in that position to be able to influence people.
Anyways, I don't know if you have any new art projects that you're onto right now that we're going to see soon.
Yeah. So here, I actually have a TV, rabbit hole TV series that I did for it was a logo contest that we did for the rabbit hole to come up with a logo design back in
Yeah.
February of last year, and I came up with that one, and then I was like, oh, I want to try to learn to do the neon lighting, and then I
Yeah.
was like, oh, let's go to this one, and then it just, it kind of went from there. I, the funny thing is I even did one of Knox as rapper Jesus.
Oh yeah,
So
I
so yeah, it kind of it started a whole tangent of stuff. So what stuff?
so we'll see more of your art soon then. I was very happy to do this with you, and I'm so happy you took the time for me, and you explained a bit about all of your passion for Ren and for painting. It's been really nice. So thank you so much for that.
Oh no, thank you for reaching out to me, because this is what I've been wanting. I've been honestly wanting to do a podcast, and I mentioned that to like Ricochet, because I met up with him and a few people when I went to the Secret Garden party, and so like I was like, hey, I'm gonna start a podcast maybe, and I have a name and everything, but it just I never got around to doing it because I'm like, I want to work on my art. I'm gonna go do this, ADHD stuff where
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, ooh, ooh. So this has been the start, I'd say the start
Yeah.
of a lovely new journey.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that you would have a lot to say and a lot of interesting subjects to talk about on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to your podcast then if you're
Oh
going
yeah,
to make it
absolutely.
great. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being on the show, and I hope to see you soon.
My pleasure, my dear. It was lovely talking to you as well.